like this.
Even quickly passing to him and saying, this opening in this. Okay.
Just open it and stand like this. You've done it on
Basically, it's a photo. He cannot do it because, unfortunately, he has to do what else. He cannot release the moment. Yeah. Okay, there we are. Everybody got the photo?
Thank you. Now it's over to you, Saba.
Actually, I want to say a few words and then I'll speak. Just do it sitting down. Do it sitting down. Do it sitting down. Make it easy.
Should I say it at the end or not?
Say it again.
I think it would be nice if we do what are insults now.
Okay. So, you know, I picked up this book while coming.
Can I say a few words?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. First of all, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to be. No audio? Is this better? Can you hear me now? All right. First of all, hello everyone. Thank you so much for coming. It's wonderful to be back in Calcutta, the city where I lived for many, many years. And it's particularly special to be at the Oxford bookstore. In fact, Oxford occupies a special place in the intellectual life of most Bengali intellectuals, because when you ask them where they read a book, where they learned about something, they usually say Oxford and leave it at that. And then you have to sort of push a little and say Oxford University or Oxford Bookstore. And 99% of the time it's Oxford Bookstore, I'm afraid. So thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be back. It's also, I think, a huge, huge honor for me to have the book released by Ashish. Ashish and I have known each other since the 1980s. He's been described, I think, correctly as one of India's great public intellectuals. I'll go a little further. He is India's greatest public intellectual, an upholder of the liberal tradition, a man who's never afraid to stand up for what he believes in, and I think a model for all of us. A big hand for Ashish. And before Saba starts grilling me, let me just say what a pleasure it is to talk to Saba, who is one of our most seasoned political journalists, who's covered the BJP with such intense perceptiveness over the years, who understands what's going to happen even before it happens, and whose articles I've enjoyed reading for many years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Now you can.
Thank you. You know, I picked up. Thank you so much, Vir. I picked up this book. I started reading it on the flight here, and as somebody who writes myself, I was so impressed for two things. One, Vir, I have to tell you this, that journalists sometimes write the most awful, god-awful, tedious books, which are not even well written. This is a delight. It reads so smoothly, believe me. And the good part of it is he's put in details. To put in details and to have a narrative move quickly is it requires a special writer, and Vir combines that with nuggets, which I thought I know about politics. So I said, okay, now I'm going to read another journalist, tell me stuff that I know. But no, there were wonderful details which I had no idea about. And it's not preachy. The book is not preachy. He's not pontificating down to you. He's having a conversation. And the ability to put in nuggets, details which are really interesting into a very quick, readable, very, very well written book. So please, congratulations. I really marvel your skill at the ability to tell this story. And I'm going to start off by asking you, this book is about elections. And Vir Sanghvi begins by saying that the 1971 elections was the one that defines India as we know it today. So just please tell us about that.
Thanks for all the very nice things you said. A little bit about the book. It started out live as a television series It was, I think, 8 episodes, and much of what you see on the. Can you hear me?
I think you Saba's mic.
I do Saba's mic.
Or
Okay.
the hand mic. Or hand mic. Yeah, I might not.
Okay. Is this better? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? All right.
That sound is a must in every South Asian meeting. So practically I used it in school.
Whenever you ask for feedback, this is what you get. No, so it started out, sorry, for those of you who missed the beginning, it started out live as a television series. So many of the quotes and the incidents in the book were actually in the series footage. It wasn't just somebody talking. Then, after the series was telecast, I had a lot of people come up to me and say, so you mean this Congress split in 69? It's not the same Congress in 1947 or before? And it struck me that one of the tragedies of India is that because we have so little sense of history, not that many younger people know what happened. For instance, many young people, we saw this a couple of years ago when we had the anniversary of Blue Star and the events that led up to it. Many young people believed that Blue Star and the Delhi riots were one and the same thing. They didn't know who Bhindranwala was. So it struck me that if I had these scripts lying around, why not turn them into a book? And then I was very clear that rather than write a book giving my view of Indian history and how I think things have developed, I mean, I am not a public intellectual. Nobody really gives a damn what I think. I thought I'd write it as a narrative and make it a page turner and tell it as a story so that youngish people, and youngish people, I mean even older people who are not that well informed, have some idea of how Indian politics developed. We kept it short, we made it a paperback, we priced it reasonably, and it's actually a little bit of bride. Exceeded our expectations in sales, and it's a sort of hardy perennial. I think people will buy it at airports, railway stations, because we set out to write the kind of book that once you started to read it, you kept turning the pages. Unlike so many political books, which once you put down, you will not pick up again. So that was the genesis of the book. As for the 1971 election, in answer to Saba's question, my intention was quite simple. If I was going to write about elections, I thought 71 was the first significant election. It was significant because it led to the creation of a party, a major national party that was based only around a personality. Indira Gandhi, as you probably know, split the Congress in 1969. And much of what we considered the Congress till that point, the organization, the structure, many of the leaders were left behind. And the new Congress, which was initially called Congress R for Congress ruling, had really nothing more than Mrs. Gandhi's personality going for it. It didn't have the organization, it had nothing. In fact, the opposition played into her hands by also making that election about Indira Gandhi, which led to her famous slogan, "Wo kehte hain Indira hatao, main kehti hu Gareebi hatao." And that's how politics in India pretty much has developed. Populism, individuals, and then, before there could be an election in 77, in 1975, Mrs. Gandhi quite shamelessly promoted her son, Sanjay, a man with no education, no political experience, a thug-like figure who was essentially a motor mechanic. And the state mechanism and machinery was used to retreat it as the future of India. We were pretty horrified then, but now it's routine, it's normal. We imagine that dynasty is an integral part of Indian politics. My point is, it wasn't really all that changed after 1970. You want to? Yeah, you want to?
We become like a little punch and
Or a punch and duty show. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm just going to try. Just let the audio
Okay.
take the one. Can you hear me? This side? Okay. I have a loud voice, so let's
Not really. Use this.
You know, you've also known a lot of people. That's what also makes it interesting. There are when people write about Indian politics, there are those academic books that people who are supposed to know better than the rest of us, who write from a position of authority. Some of those books are dreadfully boring and pompous, but besides that, you've known a lot of people. And what I find is, if I may just ask you, there's a little bit of subjectivity. For instance, I get the impression you do not like VP Singh and you do not like Narsim Rao. And
What Sanjay Gandhi you this
No, I'm looking at the, you know what's really nice, he's gone through the Indra era, the whole the whole system that came up around Sanjay. But there are these little stories about the characters like Chandrasekhar, Indra Kumar Gujral. So you know, there's a lot of that. And the impression that I came up with, Vir Sanghvi does not like Vishwanath Pratap Singh. He does not like this Narasimha Rao. And but there are a few people. You seem to have a lot of sympathy for Rajiv. Actually, let me be a little wicked here. Members of the dynasty you seem to like. All the other characters. Besides Sanjay Gandhi.
Alright. Indira Gandhi, I don't think comes up very well in the book.
No, but
Yeah, no, if you look at the dynasty, I think the book is actually quite critical of Indira Gandhi for destroying the institutions of Indian democracy, or at least subverting them. The book is very critical of Sanjay Gandhi for reasons that should need no explanation. The book regards, and I regard, Rajiv Gandhi as an honorable failure, a man who came to office with good intentions, but because of his lack of political experience and understanding, actually screwed it up quite badly. The book is sympathetic to Sonia Gandhi, who I regard as an interesting figure, an Italian who came to India, chose to abandon an Italian identity, identified herself quite closely with India, hated politics when she was married to Rajiv and he was Prime Minister and they lived at number 5 Racecourse Road. No politician would go beyond number 7 Racecourse Road, which was the office, because she wouldn't allow a politician into the house. This kind of woman then, in 1991, when Rajiv has been assassinated, the Congress Working Committee passed the resolution asking her to take over as Congress President, which meant, in effect, with Narasimha Rao was then selected, that she would have been the next Prime Minister of India. She turned it down and said, I have absolutely no interest. This kind of woman then comes back to politics, initially does very, very badly, is written off by everybody. I think Outlook, which you then worked for, put her on the cover as a cartoon character called Miss Clueless. Yeah, suggesting that she was an idiot and had no business being in politics. And then she leads the Congress against all expectations to this victory, keeps a rickety coalition in place, and then does even better, beating anti-incumbency at the next election, and then it all collapses. So I just find the Sonia Gandhi story quite fascinating. The book is critical of Rahul Gandhi. It says he fought the worst election campaign in living memory, and it says that he destroyed or suicide bombed his own campaign by giving that interview to Times Now at the beginning of the election. So yes, I mean, the ministry does fascinate me, but not everyone comes off that way.
We also, because I remember running into you in the days when Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. And in fact, I don't know if you remember, but we went on a trip together to China on a Prime Ministerial trip. And we was, all of us, he was known to know everybody in power at that time. You knew the whole. I remember how you told me one of the editors by appearing to make it look as if you got something exclusive and he hadn't. And he was very, very disturbed, and he was just playing a joke actually. He was just, as if he'd gone off with the Prime Minister and got something, he was just pulling the other editor's leg. Anyway, you're also very, you respect Vajpayee, as indeed did I, and I ideologically opposed to BJP, but that's a different matter. You respect Vajpayee, but this book actually comes to an end with the coming of Modi. So just now that we're here in front of an audience, do you have any opinion yet, or you'd like to say that about for a little bit briefly?
About Modi? No, I'm happy to talk about Modi. Like you, I think I'm ideologically not a great BJP supporter, and almost all the praise of Vajpayee is for the fact that he didn't actually have many BJP type views that he had become by the end. Initially, he can't have been a liberal. No liberal joined the RSS and wears khaki knickers. But along the way, presumably he changed and became much more liberal in his views. I admired his intellect. I admired his personality. But there were till the end elements of his ideology I was never quite comfortable with. My view on Modi is relatively straightforward.
I believe that he is a hardcore RSS person. I believe, as he often says, he was brought up by the RSS. He regards people like Golwalkar and Savarkar as his heroes and ideological gurus. He may now go on about Subhash Chandra Bose and Sardar Patel, but I don't think those are the views he subscribes to. For instance, he never mentions that Sardar Patel actually banned the RSS. He's very much within the RSS tradition. It's not a tradition I respect, admire, or I think is good for India. I think there are uncomfortable fascist parallels which you can see in the admiration leaders in the RSS had for Adolf Hitler during that period. As a politician, I think Modi must bear responsibility for the Gujarat riots. You can argue, as Modi supporters do every alternate day, that nobody has been able to prove anything against him, that he's got a clean sheet from various SITs and courts. And I'm happy to accept that. Who am I to dispute the word of the courts? But two things. First of all, if you are chief minister of a major state, if a minority is attacked, if your police force refuses to protect them, then I think there is an element of responsibility which you can't share. If having failed, which is entirely possible, because Modi had not much experience, he may just have not known, he may not have known how to run the state, that I would forgive to an extent. But if you then go into the next election and make minority bashing your slogan, if you sort of glorify the riot, if you say in speeches, as Modi did again and again, that a vote for the opposition is a vote for Mia Musharraf, what you are doing is you're glorifying the communal divide. You're appealing and pandering to the worst kind of Hindu sentiments. So I don't think he emerges very well on that front. On the development front, I think it's difficult to deny that he's a good administrator and a decisive person at the state chief minister level. I was worried by his campaign to become first leader of the BJP, less worried by his campaign to become prime minister, because people forget that Modi actually fought two campaigns. The first campaign was within his party to oust Advani, who was then the leader, and to become the face of the party and the prime minister candidate. And he was really not, I think, at that stage, the candidate of the BJP base around the country. He was the candidate of BJP hardliners, of BJP workers. Now, every political party, the people who are activists, who actually run the party, have a much more extremist position than the general public. Modi was their candidate, and he did it by making statements that I thought were quite irresponsible and not exactly designed to promote communal harmony. He was assisted in this task by many people on social media who, even if they don't all work for the BJP or come from BJP control room, many of whom he follows himself. These people said the worst and continue to say the worst, most communal things about Muslims, about minorities. They call secularism, which I believe in, secularism. They treat liberals as abusers. Modi follows these people. That, I think, is occasion for disquiet. He also, and we all wondered about this, was an effective chief minister, but running Gujarat is very different from running India. And he made such extravagant promises. The rupee would be at 45. Amit Shah said, once Modi becomes prime minister, no Pakistani will dare cross the border, there will be no terrorism. Modi said he would teach Pakistan a lesson. The heirs to Mia Musharraf's tradition were his true enemies. On almost every promise he has made on the economy, on foreign policy, he has failed. It could be that he just had a run of bad luck. It could be that he will improve, that he will recover. So it's too early to pass judgment. But so far, at least, I think there's a lot of reason for disquiet.
One of the strengths of the book is most of us, we look back and we say the Congress ruled for so many years. And then the BJP came to power. Broadly, I mean, people like me are supposed to know better, but sometimes even I find that I forget about the Janata. I mean, I know it happened, but you forget the details. So what is really, it's really a very, even a useful reference, because what Vir Sanghvi has done is told you those complicated negotiations that took place in between all these big changes in India, in how Vishwanath Pratap Singh outplayed Chandrasekhar, and then Chandrasekhar got his own back. So we just share with us that you're one of those things that you must have discovered while speaking to people for the book, because it's embedded with interviews of those who were witness or players of that era.
Yeah, I think it's now standard for people to say about Modi, particularly the Modi thugs, that the Congress 60 years and it ruined India, and our heroes only had a year and a half. Give him longer and we'll clean up the mess. I mean, this is true, but not also true, because first of all, the Congress did not rule India for 60 years. There was, as you pointed out, the interregnum of the Janata period, and there was what, 6 years of Vajpayee. The people, whatever they're complaining about, Vajpayee and the BJP had 6 years to clean it up. If these steps are right, and the reason India is in a mess is because of previous governments, then surely the BJP must bear at least some of the blame. And during that period when Vajpayee tried to clear up the mess, such was his impact on the people of India that after 6 years, he called the election early because he was so sure he was going to win. The people of India voted him out. So it's not as simple as the Congress ruled for so long, it did a very bad thing, and now great Modi has come. And yet many people believe that, which is why one of the reasons I wrote that book, to remind people of what had happened and that there were other governments that had other successes and in many cases failures, which is in no way to downplay what the Congress did. I think Indira Gandhi, as I said before, subverted many of the institutions of our democracy. I think Rajiv Gandhi, though he may have started out with good intentions, was an unsuccessful prime minister overall because he failed to achieve what he set out to do. I think Narasimha Rao in the first year and a half was a good prime minister because India was facing an enormous balance of payments and foreign exchange reserve crisis. We were effectively bankrupt. He was asked by the IMF and the World Bank to liberalize the economy. He went outside the political framework. He brought in Manmohan Singh, who was a civil servant, opened up the economy. We have seen some of the benefits of that. But I am critical, as Saba has correctly pointed out in Narasimha Rao, because having done the reforms, and I don't know if you know this, but Narasimha Rao was not actually in politics. In the 1991 election, Narasimha Rao did not contest. He had packed up his house in Delhi. He had said he was very old and very unwell, and he was going to go back to Andhra and retire. Rajiv Gandhi dies, and there is this jostle for power within the Congress. Sonia Gandhi turns down the Congress presidency. Sharad Pawar, who Sonia Gandhi did not and does not like, and who Rahul Gandhi also I don't think like, who Rajiv Gandhi detested, then makes an attempt at power. At this stage, Sonia Gandhi sends for P.N. Haksar, who was a great advisor to Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Haksar says, all right, let's think about it. What about Shankar Dayal Sharma, who was then Vice President of India? So they go off to Shankar Dayal Sharma and say, Sonia has asked that you step down as Vice President, become Congress President. You will almost certainly be the next Prime Minister of India. And Shankar Dayal Sharma, possibly the only man in history to do this, says, no, I have no desire to be Prime Minister. I'm very happy where I am. So they come back and they're left with this mess. So they look for the least objectionable, sort of compromised candidate. And poor Narasimha Rao, who needs to sleep 4 hours every afternoon and looks like he's asleep even when he's allegedly awake, is given this job. And they say he's not very well, sounds unkind, he won't last very long, but he's a good transitional leader. And what happens? This half-dead Narasimha Rao moves into Racecourse Road, and suddenly the Viagra of power gets him, and he turns into a completely different person, into a great reformer, and does very impressive things for the first year and a half. And I think India should be grateful to him even today for what he did. But having achieved those, he goes back to sleep. So then the Babri Masjid crisis happens. Many people warning, including Shankar Dayal Sharma, who was in Russian, like for God's sake, don't let this happen. They're pretty much going to destroy the mosque. He sleeps through it. The mosque is destroyed, he does nothing. We have in the book accounts from various Muslim leaders who had met him before and said this was going to happen, who during the demolition tried to call him to say, send the paramilitary forces in, do something, protect the mosque. And they were told, Shahid Siddiqui is quoted, or other people are quoted, saying, sorry, PM is asleep, he cannot meet you. He meets them only after the mosque is demolished. This is bad enough. You then have riots in major Indian cities. That's very different. In January, after that initial Babri Masjid demolition frenzy has died down. You have the worst riot in Bombay, which is effectively a pogrom. The Shiv Sena goes after Muslims and destroys them, destroys their property. The Shiv Sena, as you probably know, is at that stage certainly less a political party than a loose confederation of commercially minded thugs. So any communal attack, a riot, was an excuse to go and raid Muslim property, steal things from their showrooms, enrich yourself, blackmail people, persecute them. Everyone sees Bombay burning. It hasn't happened ever before. And tells Narasimha Rao, do something. Narasimha Rao goes to sleep. Bombay is really burnt. It has never quite recovered from that communal divide. On the bodies of the people who died in those riots, the Shiv Sena wins the next election and comes to power in Maharashtra. Following which, Narasimha Rao begins to associate with really undesirable characters, including, I don't know how many of you know him, a monk called Chandraswami. The Prime Minister's office, traditionally, the house, consisted of two buildings on Racecourse Road, both not very large. One was number 7, which is official residence, we're all meeting there. One was number 5, which is the private residence, where Sonia Gandhi wouldn't allow politicians to come. Narasimha Rao said, I want number 3 as well. Now, Narasimha Rao at this stage is a widower. He has no children living with him. So why, you wonder, does this guy want 3 bungalows? But he moves into number 3. Number 5 is used as a guest house. His sons, who are in Hyderabad, move in and start meeting businessmen for reasons that should be fairly obvious. And Chandraswami appears and starts performing havan on behalf of Narasimha Rao in the Prime Minister's house at number 5 regularly. Every time Narasimha Rao has a crisis, instead of confronting it, he turns to Chandraswami, who produces the matchbox and they light a havan, which is a hell of a way to run India. Chandraswami then becomes a huge conduit for politicians to meet businessmen, becomes effectively a Rasputin-like figure. So the second half of Narasimha Rao, by which stage also he's given up on reforms anyway. And there is yet another incident when Harshad Mehta comes into the Prime Minister's house. He comes to number 7 and hands in what Harshad Mehta claims is 1 crore in cash. I know people who work at the Prime Minister's house during that period, and they say Harshad Mehta is lying. It was only 85 lakhs. But surely that is bad enough. So when you consider the second half of Narasimha Rao's reign, I think India would have been much better off if, having done the reforms, he stepped down and maybe somebody else had taken over. But go on.
Manmohan Singh is also somebody who we. This is the kind of anecdote you'll get in the book. What he's just described to you, descriptions about what was going on in PMO. Manmohan Singh is another person who's analyzed, and you start off by praising him, and then you really think very little of him. Yeah. So briefly, and then I'm going to get Ashish in because I think he's getting restless.
No, on the contrary. On the contrary, I do believe that a chief case is supposed to be seen, not heard.
No, we hope to hear you.
I will try to be as brief as possible. I think it should go to discussion. I think one of the attractiveness of the book is this, that it reads almost like a story. And I think in that sense, it's very important. My comments will be geared to the expectation that this will be the first book in a series, because this public education is a very important exercise. This book mediates between political science scholarship and a people's understanding of politics. Now, I agree with him in his broad outlines of analysis. I may disagree with some of my expressions from the persons. I think Narasimha Rao was also in many ways a great Prime Minister. Apart from Nehru and Vajpayee, he will be the third person whom I nominated. Because here is a man who had no political base whatsoever. Don't forget, there are only 2 ways of becoming a Prime Minister of India. Either you have a huge following, a mass base, or you have the skills to diplomatically maneuver other politicians who have mass bases. So he is the only Prime Minister who survived the full term without having a mass base. Even in Andhra, he didn't have a base because he was a Brahmin and he had been marginalized by these emerging new communities which are numerically preponderant but ritually lower in status. That's another story. Narasimha Rao is one of the two most intelligent politicians I have met in my life. I will probably place him second. The most intelligent politician I have met in my life was Shaktivarma. And the second most important is Narasimha Rao. He was a scholar. He could read, write, and speak brilliantly in half a dozen languages. He knew 18 languages. He also was a great manipulator, naturally. Otherwise, he would not have become prime minister. And if you mention what he did in Ajodhya, or did not do in Ajodhya, I will mention one of the main grudges of the RSS leadership there, because I was in Ajodhya. We did a study of the demolition of the mosque in Ajodhya, which was used for the prosecution of the culprits in the court. So, in some sense, my stand on it is clear. But I must tell you, the RSS grudge was this, that Narasimha Rao is a first-class liar and a very skillful manipulator, and he is leading us up the garden path. He wants us to fail in this endeavor. At the last moment, he hopes that we will withdraw, and he will use it against us as an instance of cowardice, that they never wanted to do this, demolish the mosque, that therefore they actually do not believe in what they say, and it doesn't deserve your support. And now the ploy failed, but it was the whole exercise. If you believe the RSS terms, was primarily a protest in Narasimha Rao's manipulative politics. So in that, it is a slightly different perspective. I am not disowning that. Now, I would like to, in the rest of my comments, I would like to point out 2 or 3 things, because that is the important part of the story. In India, except for Jawaharlal Nehru, nobody has got a second continuous term, except you can call it Sonia Gandhi, got it, or Manmohan Singh, he got the second term, but Manmohan was more or less a puppet. I don't have much respect for him. I have respect for him as little bit as a scholar in economics, but he had an economics way of looking at things, and that is very, very limited. But the point I would like to make, particularly, this is a very ideological city in Calcutta. It thinks in ideological terms, so I think some should be very clear. I mean, Calcutta still has more Stalinists than Russia has. In most of India, ideology doesn't matter, because in ideologies are skin deep. Because in the West, ideologies are more important because faiths have eroded. They have become they have been defamed, so to speak. So ideology comes in as a substitute for faith. It gives meaning to life. So people stick to ideology. Here, ideology is an instrument of political climbing and social climbing too. This is a survey we have done. We have been pioneering this surveys of political behavior in India for the last 50 years. Shows that 85% of those surveyed, this is a national survey, do not know what secularism is. Understandably, 2.5% speak English. Mm-hmm. 40% they say speak Hindi, so 25% of the 40 is accounted for by Hindi dialects who do not really follow Hindi, except the Bombay film. That's enough.
So, Ashita, should I should I get back to the Manmohan Singh era and the Prime Minister or not? Because
No,
we are getting into philosophical,
let me
ideological.
make this particular point clear, then we can come back. So here, ideology being what it is, nobody really has an ideology. These are all ways of political movement. But politicians are basically knowledge proof. and they are also, most of them are thieves. Those who are not thieves, the majority of them are also thieves, but they have not been caught. But there is an important part of the story that these politicians represent parties and which have been out of power for centuries. They come from parties which are, on backgrounds which do not allow them, which is not a part of our world altogether. And this has changed the face of Indian politics. They are basically practical people who do not have people to trust, people to guide them, no clear access for them. So therefore they trust their daughters or sons and stick to the family. Moreover, they don't have ancestral wealth or access to other kinds of wealth, to the professional skills and so on and so forth. They are people who leave out of politics and fight their political battles through funds collected through arm twisting and corruption in general. Now these people nonetheless have changed the face of India because there is a price we have paid for democracy, but they have nonetheless changed the face of India because there are places in India, in many states, where none of the elite castes have had a chief minister for decades now. There are states that for 30 years, 35 years, no upper caste politician has been chief minister. They come from the bottom. I think there's still their theft also has a social justification.
Ashita, can I get back to the theme of the mandate and the elections and all? Because we are getting into the, we just have about 10
No, I want to wind up. So 71 was different because, and this point I want to, the one I was leading towards it. 71 was different because for the first time, a prime minister who was chosen, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, had no political base. The syndicate had political base, and they chose her. They themselves chose her because she did not have a base, and they thought she would be displaced at their will. And she introduced a new kind of media-based, media-intensive politics. So that's the thing, and that is the politics, populist politics we are seeing. And that description is perfect. Now I want to point out one absent actor in this book. Okay, he's there, actor is there, but he has not emphasized this that much. It is the Indian voter. The Indian voter kicked out Indira Gandhi after the first term. Indira Gandhi had not only come with a huge majority, she also won the Bangladesh war and also explored a nuclear device. It was a very popular thing in India to do. And yet, within 3 years, she lost her legitimacy. Till now, there is an iron law of Indian politics which no politician has been able to break. Narendra Modi might break it. Namely, that actual tenure of legitimacy in India is not more than 2.5 to 3 years. 2 years. In Gandhi's case, it was 2 years. Some didn't, that's not ours. It was not 2, maybe 3. People didn't know what this is liberty was. That's a different thing. So that is the other part of it. They have till now always voted wisely. And the knowledge of political knowledge, in terms of, the hard knowledge. India is one of the few countries in the world, if not the only country, large country, but one of the only large country in the world, where their political knowledge equals and often surpasses the political knowledge of the state. That's what I'm going to say.
Just if you want to get a question.
You want me to comment on what he said, or you want me to answer one more question?
You know,
I can do both of you then.
you do both, and then we'll get
All
a
right.
few questions from which are questions and not commentary. That's
Yeah, I agree with almost everything Ashikandi said. I have only one thing to add, that we say that the Indian politician has no ideology and Indian politics is not based on ideology.